Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are, of course, your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. We are entering the final crucial days of a January transfer window. We are feasting, we are starving, we are hungry, and so much that co-hosts have been changing throughout the week on Last Word on Spurs. But arguably, we're only upgraded. No disrespect to all the other amazing co-hosts I've got out there as well. I've only gone and got the king of Spurs ex-Twitter Rati with me before we bring in our wonderful special guest. Billy T is with me as my co-host. I'm honoured. Bill, lovely to have you alongside me. Are we bomber hunting here? Is this what we've come to?
It's certainly got to be, mate, because it's been, as you said before the show, it's been dry January, hasn't it? It's been a desert for us. I mean, we had obviously had the Gallagher transfer, but that feels like months ago now. So let's hope something happens in the next few days. Normally, we're a lot more fruitful at this time, aren't we? Me and you, some late night texts going on what's going to happen, but it's just been a dry period, hasn't it, mate?
Dry period. Like I say, we at the moment do feel there's a need to give whoever's going to be this manager right now or towards the end of the season, the tools they need to help Spurs compete. One man we always love having on this show. He's one of the busiest men right now on the planet in terms of football, and probably generally as well. It's never a quiet moment in terms of the transfer window. We're delighted to have back, welcoming to Last Word on Spurs, superb football reporter for the Telegraph. Mike McGrath is back. Mike, lovely to have you here. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm glad to be here. I'm pleased to be here. I love the new time because in previous windows been a bit earlier, but it's like kind of transfer window authenticity. This, the late nights when stuff happens, and this is about after a long day, you still got to keep going, and it's So it's always but it's always great to be on.
Mike, you're a star. We love having you here. And I know many do describe it as the graveyard shift. You're at this point where you are searching for that nugget of gold, aren't you, Bill? You're at that point now where you've been digging for a long time, but there's got to be a diamond, isn't there?
Yeah,
amongst
this is
got to be
the graveyard shift for normal people. For us transfer heads, this is our time to shine, definitely.
Well, listen, Joe, everybody's out there. We are going to try and get the latest in terms of where Spurs are going into these final remaining days of the transfer window. We'll be discussing what Mike has made of the changes behind the scenes at Spurs. Of course, the last time Mike was on, Daniel Levy was at the helm. Yes, we keep saying to these wonderful journalists out there, that's how much stuff has changed in this last 6 to 7 months. Tottenham have also won a trophy. Yes, we have. And yet still 6, 7 months later, Mike, you won't be surprised to hear, we're all still very desperately unhappy. So it's just another normal day of supporting Tottenham, right? I mean, what you made, Mike, before we get into everything, and guys, if you can out there, hype, subscribe to the show, also to Billy T's wonderful podcast. That's also in the collab link as well. Mike, what have you made of the last 6, 7 months around Tottenham in general?
What a roller coaster, really. I mean, you've got, the kind of euphoria of Bilbao is kind of why I always, I've got relatives who and my son supports Spurs, so it's so you can't we can't really dislike Ange Postecoglou because for bringing a trophy to the club. Yet that seems such a lifetime ago now, and the kind of it's gone. The roller coaster of emotions for the fans has been just unbelievable, really. And I was at the Burnley game, and I'm based in the north, so I don't see Spurs a lot. So I was at the Burnley game, and we had to kind of, a few of us in the press box had to have a kind of double take about some of the what the fans were singing towards Frank quite early in the game. We're like, did we hear do we hear that right? And we're like, yeah, that was that was towards the manager 20 minutes in. And you're like, wow, this is bad. So they're on that. There's unhappiness at what fans are seeing. Yet also, in the very next phase of the game, you hear the chant "Champions of Europe" as well. So, I mean, I can't really see many other clubs that have that range of emotions in the fan base, and also with news as well, what's going on, and the kind of the highs, the disappointments of the injuries and the results, and also it was a busy summer transfer wise, and kind of less so in the last in this window. So yeah, it's you guys don't ever have a shortage of things to kind of discuss on your podcast.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing me and Bill, we joke all the time, don't we? You know, this club, in terms of giving us things to talk about, Bill, endless. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, I mean, only on the day of the game we had a literal car crash, didn't we, this week? So
literally,
it never ends.
Never ends. Honestly, it never ends. You know what, Mike? Let's come on to just how crazy this football club is, because you know we know Spurs at the moment are not even mid-table in terms of the Premier League, but in Europe, it's a whole different story for Tottenham. You know, they finished above Paris Saint-Germain, Inter, Real Madrid, Man City and Barcelona in the Champions League table. And at present, they're currently 14th in the Premier League. I mean, most would describe it as the most Tottenham thing possibly imaginable. It is a crazy football club. I just wonder, because you referred there, Mike, to the scenes at Burnley and the frustration around the tactics and the chants against the manager. Just how big a win was that, Mike, for everyone connected around Tottenham to finish inside the top 8 of the Champions League, avoid the punishment round? And does that, for now, we'll come on to Thomas Frank's future a bit later in the show, does that settle a bit of noise around the club going into the final few days of the window and, of course, approaching Man City to come at the weekend, Mike?
I think it was an excellent week in Europe, to be an excellent 7 days, you know, to be Dortmund and then to be Eintracht Frankfurt. I always do think that this team and Thomas Frank himself is kind of like one really bad defeat away from crisis again. So I don't think that it erases everything that's going on at the club at the moment. I also look, we are a very, very strong competition in England. We've had the majority of we have all but Newcastle are straight through to the last 16 in the Champions League. I do think that it might reflect all. I'm not saying they're not good wins, but it does reflect the fact that we are more dominant than the Bundesliga at the moment, and the Dortmund and the Eintracht wins were good, but I do think that we're just a very strong a very strong set of English clubs in the Champions League as well. The Dortmund one might have been a little bit, the sending off might have impacted the game quite a lot as well, I think, in that game. But it was an excellent night for them in Eintracht. But I just still think, you might call Man City a free hit. I don't know. They always play well against Man City, Spurs, and then although maybe better away from home than at their own stadium. I think it's a bit of a free hit, but I just do always feel that they are really, really close to just being the back page story again on how Thomas Frank's going to get it right, and will he get that chance to get it right.
Mike, it's been reported that the going through to the last 16 could earn Tottenham anywhere between, I know 46 million has been reported, but a friend of the show, Connor, thinks it could even be up towards 70 million just for getting through to this phase. Obviously, if you count all the money that Tottenham generate from revenue and things like that. Now, in the aftermath of the game, Thomas Frank said it was amazing. We had 12 outfield players that were fit. In January, Tottenham have had 5 injuries to key players, and it's only Matis Tel, Vicario, Danso, Xavi, and Vicario are the only 5 players that have not had an injury this season. So we're right down to the bare bones. Do you think, the fact that now Tottenham are in the last 16 and the fact that, we've had an amazing amount of injuries in January alone, do you think this will inspire Tottenham to go into the market in the next few days?
I think that there is a willingness to look at the market and try and bring in the right, the right people they can, but there's obviously problems with that. I think you mentioned the injuries as well. I remember doing a story last year. I think they were looking at trying to, because injuries was a problem for Ange as well. And
Seems to have been just bad this season, doesn't it? It's crazy.
Yeah, they were definitely looking to change that that department and kind of make additions to that department as well as the other things that you saw behind the scenes during the summer. I'm not quite sure how far those changes have gone, but obviously this is clearly a problem for Spurs. I mean, it's an incredible injury list that Thomas Frank has had to contend with. I think the market itself, I just think even those who have got lots and lots of money for available through the Premier League financial rules, it's a really difficult market to get value from, for Spurs in particular. From I mean, we've got the the criteria of what they want. They clearly want a wide forward. It's just in that I'm led to believe that they prefer a loan rather than to spend a lot of money on a new signing. So a loan, and then you're in that position there where it's a really limited market in terms of who's available, and normally when they're available, then they're not playing. They're not playing for their own club. And if they are playing, then clubs don't want to let them go. So it's a really difficult market for that. And I think Spurs have found that in terms of that wide position. I think Gallagher I think he's a good sign, a really positive signing. I think he brings a lot to clubs and teams that he's played in. And I suppose money-wise, it was like for like with Brennan Johnson going out around about the same. And I think that was a good signing, but that's that was an opportunistic signing as well. There was a guy who really desperately wanted games and to come back to England. I thought they did well there, but this wide one is really been quite difficult for them to nail down.
And just on that point, I mean, we've discussed already, Mike, you touched upon the manager there and the situation that you occurred, obviously, when you went to Burnley, and almost having to take a double take at some of the chants that were being aimed at him and his brand of football. I just wonder from your perspective, look, we're going to come on to his future again, as I say, a bit later on, but how much do you think the noise around Thomas Frank, especially in this last month, has been a massive distraction for everybody connected to the football club when it comes to this transfer window? Because you could argue at the moment you might be approaching players, whether it's before the window or during this window, and they're not quite sure who they're going to play for. I suppose to ask that back to you, do players really care? Does that really matter? Do you think the noise around Thomas Frank's future has in any way disrupted Spurs' transfer window, before we even come on to the fact that Parategy seems to be walking out halfway through it as well? I mean, what have you made, Mike, of the noise around Frank and Parategy, and has that made an impact?
I don't particularly think that kind of situation impacts on players if they want to join a club. I mean, you only have to look at Man City, where Pep Guardiola's future has been kind of talked about all season. Will this be his last? Will this even, or would he see out his contract? Even then, that's not particularly long term. Yet they signed the two big players, the big signings of the January transfer window. So I do think that when players are looking at it, I think they normally look at the club and the opportunities that they get, rather than the manager is, the manager might be gone in a couple of games. But nevertheless, the focus has really been on Frank, particularly around that West Ham defeat, and it hasn't been, the focus has been on what they're going to do with Frank, and rather than really the headlines being about signings. So in some respects, it's the focus has been on the manager, but I really don't. I'm not sure whether it's it's they're so linked, that you could have a player kind of deciding his future, but based on that, really.
One of the players who's been in the headlines for transfer news was a player that scored last night, Kolo Muani. Obviously, he scored again against a former club, and interestingly, a different former club in Juventus have been quite strongly linked with him in the last couple of days. Thomas Frank said he hopes the goal will inspire him to go on a run of form, because we've not seen him score in the Premier League so far yet. But there are question marks surrounding his future. There's been a couple of reports saying, actually Tottenham want him to stay. Where do you think we're at with Kolo Muani at the moment? Could you foresee? Because apparently, the reports are that he'd be quite keen to go back to Juventus and have a return there. Where do you think we're at with that? Do you think there's a chance that Tottenham might let him go in the next couple of days?
Well, I think that from what I've seen of him live, has been, I think he's looked short of fitness when I've seen him, which maybe is not a great reflection of what he can bring to the team, because he didn't seem kind of suited to the Premier League when I did see him on those occasions. And obviously the numbers aren't great for him at the moment. And maybe that has been hampered by, not kind of like sidelined injuries, but carrying injuries, maybe carrying knocks. And but I still think with you have Dominic Solanke might be coming back, but I still think numbers will be important for Spurs. I don't really think they particularly want to lose any. Maybe Solanke returning will change it, and it might be best for all. But I would at the moment, if I was Thomas Frank, I wouldn't want people out the door. I'd be wanting to add, particularly with the injury list that they have.
Yeah, I mean, he's made that clear, Mike, in pretty much a lot of the recent press conferences, that he doesn't want to see players leave the football club. I think the concern would be, Bill, and I'd be interested in your take on it as well, Bill, here, that with Muani, for me, I just think he clearly seems very disinterested when it comes to the Premier League games. And with all due respect, when it appears to be in Europe or against a former club, he seems to come alive, Bill. Would that be your concern going into the kind of second half of this season, the games to come? We need players that are really going to be all hands on deck, because I am worried. I know we joked off here about, where Spurs are fixture-wise coming up, but I feel like we're going to really need to show a bit of character in these next few games. We've got some tough games coming, Bill. I mean, how do you feel about Muani if he's going to stay?
I think you could have to seriously question his commitment to the football club. I think, as Mike says, you can tell from his body language, from his application, that there are serious question marks about how committed he is. I personally get the impression, perhaps, when all the cameras are on from Europe, he might be using us as a sort of stepping stone to either getting that France World Cup squad, and that's an uphill task for him at the moment because they're absolutely stacked, particularly in attacking talent, or get, a move to Europe. So I think when in the reality of the Premier League, or sort of your day job, if you will, he looks disinterested. He looks and it's a real shame because we've seen glimpses of his talent. Like, there's such a talent there. And we're just not seeing it enough on a consistent basis for Tottenham, which is a shame, really, because I think, a fit Kolo Muani, sort of, who's willing to really go the extra mile for Tottenham, would be an excellent sign-in. But I think it's not transpired. I mean, the fact that we're almost in February this weekend and there's been no Premier League goals from him would be a major concern for me. But at the same time, if we're going to, I know you're about to move on to this question next, Rick, but if he was to go, we would have to replace him, right?
100%. I mean, like you said there, Mike, Frank has made it clear he doesn't want to see any more players leave the football club unless there's going to be players coming in. So, I mean, just on that point, I just wonder, before we do ask about the next player, just in your experience, Mike, seeing players move on deadline day, I think what was quite interesting is, I think, Bill, clarify for me if I've got this wrong at all, but I think originally Spurs went for Muani a couple of deadline days ago. They then ended up with Tell. They got Tell, and they've ended up going back to Muani. So I just wonder, I mean, Mike, from your perspective,
when Solanke got injured quite in between, right, didn't he?
Yeah, I just wonder, is that a concern, Mike? When you are doing deadline day deals and there's kind of that mass panic around, is maybe a lack of due diligence a problem when you are going quite late in the window? You're frantically searching for, quite frankly, I wouldn't say scraps, because again, Mawani was a player that played in the World Cup. He had a very high value, but does that kind of just show you the concern if you do go for players late? Doesn't always tend to work out. When you look at both Tel and Mawani's time here, they've decided to take Tel permanently. Seen glimpses. I wouldn't say we've seen amazing progress under him. And Mawani, like we're saying, we're sitting here coming on to what will be February. We're not that massively convinced at the moment, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love I love deadline day. Monday's going to be, regardless of what happens, and it might be a quiet one. This might be a quiet January, but there will be, but it will be exciting. And it normally is with Spurs. I think it was Van der Vaart one down the years.
Yeah, that was the one. What a day that was. That was one.
You can get the gems, but you do get the panic. You do get the panic as well, and they don't, and they might not come off. It's an interesting one. Tel is obviously, look, he's not hit the heights that some might thought he had. I was hearing this week that the Roma interest is real for him, and there might be something coming from Italy for him. Whether Spurs would want to accept that, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's an incredible 24 hours, that final day of trading, because you got a lot of people offering you a lot of stuff, and you got a bit of panic as well. Brinkmanship in terms of whether you sell or not, and yeah, I mean, you say due diligence, that you've sometimes got half an hour to make a decision on a multi-million-pound player, and you think that you think your season's depending on it. So I mean, that people kind of live and die by those decisions as well. That's why they're in the job, and it makes for a really exciting final day.
And obviously, if Mawani was to leave the club, I'm sure Tottenham would be desperate to get a replacement in. One of the names that's been linked tenuously is Mateta. It's reported that he's available for £40 million. It's been reported that he is quite strongly linked to Nottingham Forest. Spurs seem to have distanced themselves a bit from the name today, with a couple of reports saying that they're not particularly interested. Do you think there's anything in Mateta to Tottenham? Could you see that, if, for example, they decide to actually let Mawani go to Juventus, and then maybe they could come in and hijack that Mateta deal for Forest? Well,
from a little bit of kind of work I've been doing around like the Larson deal, Mateta, as of this morning anyway, it looked like there was some interest from Europe, which was strong. So Italy and AC Milan. I think Juventus have been in before for him, and then the Forest deal is obviously there. If is there to be done, it's whether he would be, I think, 17th in the Premier League and not in the Champions League, and he's in the France squad. So whether that would suit him, I don't know either. But look, surprised to see those two clubs negotiating together as well after should we say relations were frosty over the summer on what Europa Conference or League that they were playing in. So look, I hadn't heard of Spurs going in for him. I saw this afternoon some reporters who have got kind of the utmost respect for reporting that Spurs weren't in for him, and I kind of took that as read, really, because I think that it'd be a bit further down the line with other clubs as well when it comes to Mateta leaving Palace.
Okay, now a name that has been doing the rounds in the last 24 hours that seems to have sparked a lot of rumours in these final days of the window. Many maybe weren't expecting him to potentially be leaving Chelsea, despite not playing there considerably for quite a long time. And that has been Raheem Sterling, who is reportedly willing to consider all options as he seeks a new permanent club after leaving Chelsea, of course, earlier in the week. Now, as you touched upon there, Mike, we know Spurs' need for a winger. given the amount of injuries they've got and given that scenario that Spurs are in desperate need of bringing somebody in. We've had some conflicting reports on Sterling as to whether Spurs are interested, would want to bring him in. He obviously is a free agent. Look, he's a very wealthy man, but it does feel that for any club moving in for him, he'd still want a decent wage. So Sterling to Tottenham, Mike, where are you on that? And is that a possibility in these final days of the window for you?
Well, I think, from doing a bit of work on this one last 24 hours, I think Sterling he just wants to play. I don't think, it's more about playing rather than money or anything like that after such a frustrating time. I think the obstacles that I would see with Spurs would be a bit of fan backlash, whether there would be any. There's barely been any business between Chelsea and Tottenham transfer-wise because of that intense rivalry between the two clubs. And of course, last season he was turning out in the colours of red and white at the Emirates. So he has played for the big rivals as well. Would that come into consideration? What I think it would be an excellent signing for anybody. I think the other problem that Spurs or anybody else might have is that he obviously hasn't been playing first team football. He's been training every day and being a professional in that respect, and turning up for work on time every day and doing his work. But as everybody kind of knows, it does take time to be ready to play in the Premier League. And that time as well, that's what clubs will have to judge whether they can bring him in now and get something for the rest of the season rather than a pre-season in the summer.
How do you feel, Bill? That would go down. Does that have interest, Bill? Coming to you, what do you think on Sterling?
I don't think it would be particularly popular with the fans, just because obviously he's played for our two rivals in his last two moves. So
yeah,
it's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? Because prime Raheem Sterling, one of the best left wingers the Premier League has ever seen. I think he's got 123 goals. I was reading earlier, But I just think I also saw that he hasn't played 2 consecutive Premier League games since February 2024. So I think it would be quite an unpopular one with the fans, perhaps. But nothing would surprise me at the moment. And I think, Mike, you mentioned at the top of the show that Sterling a forward as well, and Tottenham seem to have been after a forward since the summer transfer window. They're still after one. Another name that sort of came out of the blue today, coming from Miguel Delaney, is Diaby of ex-Aston Villa, who's playing in Saudi at the moment. Reportedly in talks with Inter as well, but Tottenham apparently looking to rival that one. It's not a link that we've seen before today. Do you think there could be any truth in Tottenham going for Diaby?
That one is not one that's I've been across at all, really. I do remember Diaby from his Aston Villa days. He had
a short spell, wasn't it?
Short spell that he had. He played really well at Leverkusen before that. I remember people were trailing him and saying that he will be a really good Premier League signing. But after a couple of years in Saudi, you talk about what would the reaction be to Raheem Sterling? I probably say I'm not sure it would be that positive if Moussa Diaby was the big January signing myself.
What do you think, though, Bill? Because on that, is that a position you'd say, Bill, that Spurs still need to fill? Would you say Diaby? Because again, interesting fan reaction to this one. What do you think, Bill?
Well, I think after the high-profile Savinho transfer saga in the summer, I think it's no secret that we're out for a left winger. I don't think Frank has decided who he's going to play there. So this season alone, we've had Xavi Simons play there. In recent games, we've had Spence play there. We've had Moani play there. Richarlison play there. We've had Odegaard play there. We've had 5 or 6 players try and play there, and no one's really settled into that role. I think, it's got to be an area that we're looking at, I think, because on that sort of left wing, he seems to have obviously found in the last couple of games a solution to play an Odegaard on the right, which seems to be working quite well. But on the left wing, all manner of different players seem to be playing there, and he's not been able to settle on any of them. So it would not surprise me at all if we were going for a winger. I know that the names that we sort of are going for, he seems to be shopping in the pensioners market, doesn't he, with the over 30 players. But Diaby, I think he was a player that was really excited when he joined Villa. I know Tottenham were linked with him back then as well. But then you just kind of question the player once they go to Saudi and then come back. It sort of questions, you know, the popularity, like Mike said. You know, whether it will be a success, because obviously the quality of that league and the jump to the Premier League is vastly different, isn't it?
Totally agree.
I think Oscar Bob would have been a great sign.
I think the same. I was amazed Tottenham didn't go in for it at that price.
I think that it kind of shows that loans were maybe more of a priority for Spurs in that forward position. But I thought for 27 million, great age.
Yeah.
And he had a few injury issues in the last year or so, but I thought whenever I've seen him for City, and I've seen him a fair bit, really, really quick feet, and you know, looks hungry as well, because he doesn't want to just sit in the City squad and get 20 games. I think he wants to do it. I think Fulham have got a decent one there.
Yeah, listen, we're going to go over to the German market at the moment because there's been a few players that have been touted around in terms of potential interest of Tottenham. One of those is Leon Goretzka. I mean, like a lot of players around Spurs had an interesting feeling on social media from Tottenham fans where it's expected, it's understood, might be leaving Bayern Munich when his contract runs out at the end of the season. However, Bayern are expected to make reportedly a final decision on his future in the next few days before this window comes to an end. Do you understand at any point, Mike, whether this guy is a genuine target for Tottenham? Where are you on Goretzka and these reports coming out in these last 24, 48 hours?
I think he'd get into most Premier League teams if available. But just down the years, I think I've seen his name mentioned down the years, and it normally ends up with him staying there at Bayern, which is a difficult place to leave, I think, for a lot of players. I didn't think it would be a Spurs priority position either, but certainly if he was on the market, I'd see quite a lot of competition for him.
And like we were saying at the top of the show, it's been a bit of a dry January for Tottenham in terms of concrete transfer links. We did have some, though, and in typical Spurs fashion, it seemed to dissipate for no fault of Tottenham. Andy Robertson. Now, Andy Robertson then, Slotters came out and been pretty bullish that he wants Andy Robertson to stay. And then there's all kinds of rumours going around that it's a bit of a moving parts thing with Roma having Tsimikas at the moment. Liverpool will sell Robertson if they can get Tsimikas back. And then Roma being interested in a Wolves left back. That seems like an awful lot of moving parts to me. Do you think there's a chance that Tottenham could go back in for Robertson and, Liverpool will be able to get Tsimikas back and then Roma will be able to get the Wolves left back? Do you think it would have to rely on all those things to happen, or do you think there's a chance that Tottenham might be able to secure him anyway?
I mean, there was obviously, it came close to happening. I was at Anfield last night and he got an unbelievable kind of ovation from everybody because he started. He's obviously not starting every game now. He started against Karabag, and they clearly want him to stay. And Liverpool, as it stands, want him to stay. I mean, my kind of feeling on the deal is that it's not completely like 100% over, but it just requires so many things to happen and to fall into place that you say it's such a long shot at the moment. I think they will have missed out on an absolutely superb player. It would have been, I think he could have been, like Zlatan was to United. I think he's just he would have brought a lot of kind of the winning mentality that he's forged and kind of developed over the last years at Liverpool. I think he would have brought that. I think he'll bring it into his next team wherever he goes, which might be the summer. So I think it's a really difficult one for Spurs because they were nearly there. I mean, they get a fair bit of stick from you boys in the market, but
we're nice to them. We don't say anything bad about them.
They did make the ground on that one, and it was Liverpool who pulled the plug on it. And like you say, they ended up last night with just Van Dijk and Robertson were their only defenders on the pitch.
Yeah,
they need him as well, so it's a difficult one.
Do you get a gauge, Mike? There's a potential shift in Tottenham's policy around. In the past with Daniel, it felt he didn't really want to spend a huge amount of money, or if any at all, on players over the 30 age bracket. And even like this wages element to it, to have been in a position where, look, I suppose I will ask you that as well with Robertson. If they were to throw money at Liverpool and say, here's a couple more million, I know what you're suggesting there is the fact they've got significantly players short. But do you feel that potentially around Spurs now since Levy's departure, there is a bit of a change around in terms of the wages and the age structure?
Yeah, it's. I remember covering the club a long time ago when the phrase resale value always came up, and the fact that
sure did.
You were buying somebody like Jermaine Jenas at the time for it seemed like a lot of money, but that money you'd think it would always increase in time when he'd get in the England squad and things like that. And there was always about increasing, not flipping players, like getting something out of them and then seeing their value increase. But I just think in general, whether it's a changes since Levy, changes of who's running the recruitment and kind of what people see around the Premier League, I just think that there is incredible value in taking somebody over 30 with the experience. I mean, there's just been absolutely loads of them. Thiago Silva was Chelsea was an excellent signing, and I think there's been like a whole kind of list of these kind of players that had been there and done it. I'm sorry to go back to Chelsea again, but like David Luiz, he went back again, didn't he? And he was good second time round. Casemiro had a kind of a little resurgence this year as well, and things like that. People are getting more and more out of the 30 plus year olds, and Tottenham probably saw that in Andy Robertson. But yeah, very different to what you normally see at the club.
And just sticking on the Liverpool theme, if we can, Mike, another player that was mentioned around Spurs during this transfer window has been Curtis Jones, who Spurs have reportedly expressed some degree of interest in. Of course, Spurs had already secured Gallagher, and there was a suggestion that they could try and bring him together with his former England teammate. I just wonder whether, from your understanding, Mike, whether this was any genuine interest from Tottenham, whether they have liked Curtis Jones, and whether in these final days, despite Slot obviously making it very, very clear he is short on numbers, whether if Tottenham were to surprise us all and going for the player, whether Liverpool would be open to potential departure for the right price. I'd
be really surprised if that happened. I'm not getting a feeling that there's a huge appetite for Liverpool to let go of him. And I also think if he was on the market, I think there'd be quite a big market for him. Homegrown, and he's played really, really well for when he's played for England. I think it's particularly under Kazi, but I think Tuchel's also given him a go, if I'm not mistaken. And he's kind of shown a bit of that, fulfilling a bit of that potential there recently. And I think he'd be. I think if he did leave Liverpool, there'd be a lot of competition for him.
And Tottenham reportedly, like you say, there are links to a couple of Liverpool players there. Obviously, the cynical Tottenham fans have got the alarm bells ringing already about the summer transfer window, because one of the players rumoured exit-wise and I'm sure no Tottenham fans would want to see him go, is Mickey van der Ven, who has been linked with a move to Liverpool tenuously. I know Tottenham will obviously be keen to sign him down to a long contract. I know he's already got a deal that goes on to 2029, but I'm sure Tottenham will be happy to extend that and particularly increase his salary because he has been a star for us. Do you think Tottenham fans should be concerned about the future of Mickey van der
Ven? Probably, yeah. I mean, look, he's such an excellent player that you'd be worried about what people are looking at if there wasn't interest in him from the Champions League teams and across Europe. I think his versatility is a real bonus for whoever that Spurs have. That they can play him. I think he played kind of like wing back and centre back, and then obviously the pace that he shows across the ground is pretty rare, really, to have a centre back that quick. So it's a big year for him World Cup wise as well. But if Spurs end up not in the Champions League, I'd be amazed if Champions League teams weren't looking at him as somebody that they could possibly target.
Just before Bill comes back in there, Mike, just one question on Mickey. There was a lot of reports, I would say, in the when were things good, Bill? In August, in September? I'm trying to think. Do you know what? It's been so long since it feels Spurs have been good that I'm trying to remember when it was. August, September time, it felt there was a lot of reports suggesting that Tottenham were going to try and sit down with Mickey's representatives, try and potentially look at extending his contract. From your understanding, Mike, has there been any kind of contract talks with Mickey over an extension? Because it feels really, since the form started to drop with Tottenham, we had the overlap interview. Now, at certain points with Mickey in certain games, I'm sure Bill will agree, the body language from him doesn't look ideal. I mean, from your perspective,
the high-profile argument with the fan, wasn't there, as well?
Yeah. At the Bournemouth game, that high-profile argument with the fan as well. What do you think, Mike? Has there been any talks over a new deal as far as you're aware, or are they not extending them?
That's not one that I've been across, but I mean, just in terms of how players are treated at clubs, I think when you have 3.5 years left, I don't think there's a particular rush to get it. I mean, look, he's not going to go. They're not going to sell him in the next few days. So I would say the summer would be kind of like generally in the natural progress of things. At the summer, that would be kind of a natural time to kind of sit down and have a talk about extending when he's got 3 years. There's no panic at that stage. And to be honest, he probably after the World Cup, if he does well and he finishes the season well, he'd probably be in a pretty strong position talking to Spurs at that stage as well.
Yeah, and obviously we know that he would want to be playing in the Champions League. And speaking of the Champions League, back at the beginning of Tottenham's campaign, we played Monaco, and one of the standout players in that game was Magnus Akliouche. I know you mentioned that Spurs might be looking for a loan. I'm sure this one in particular would excite fans. I'm sure it probably would have to be a permanent transfer and probably a significant transfer outlay to get him as well, because he looks a real superstar in the making, and he can apparently play across the front three as well. And he did look a real player when Tottenham, we struggled to cope with him in that leg. There's been a couple of reports this transfer window to say Tottenham might reignite their interest, but I'm guessing it'll be a sizable transfer fee to do that because he's definitely not one of those older players that Tottenham have been linked with. He is, I believe, 21, 22. Could you see a high-profile move for someone like Akliouche going into the deadline day? Sort of a really sort of significant transfer fee transfer?
I mean, for that one, I probably would have thought more the summer, for anybody to go for him. Again, it would be if you could get if anybody can land him, I think it'd be a great signing to bring to the Premier League. From what you hear, he's a very exciting player. I do kind of always have that when it comes to Monaco and those sub clubs. I always do feel that Paris Saint-Germain kind of sometimes have almost like first refusal when it comes to players from France, and that's quite a tempting place for somebody at Monaco. So, but look, he's clearly now he would certainly be one of those kind of Spurs type profile players in terms of age. And for that type of profile, if you buy him from the Premier League, would probably be double as well. So it's definitely a Spurs type signing, isn't it?
Just feels far too logical for us.
Yeah, Monaco, they've got their own Champions League playoffs to contend with as well, so I'm sure they'll be desperate to keep him too.
Yeah.
That would be my concern. He just seems far too logical for us to make that signing. Far, far too logical. Look, we do need to squeeze in our first break. I know a few people have asked actually in the live comments about Serge Gnabry. There's been reports out of Germany that have suggested that sort of inquired about Gnabry's availability, but the response from the players' camp was that the priorities for Bayern and that there were good talks over a contract extension as Gnabry is set to sign a new 2-year deal with the football club. Anything to add on that, Mike? I mean, Gnabry.
Another Arsenal, former Arsenal.
This football club, honestly, I am worried. We're going to come on to
another
the second
30
part.
Plus as well.
I am going to come to the second part of the show. I am getting worried, Mike, this is like an inside job with Vinay Venkatesham at the moment. I think there's a lot of concern around the fan base. We've had the manager of an Arsenal Cup. We've got the actual former Arsenal CEO running the gaff. This club is crazy. Look, we're going to squeeze in our first break of the show for our listeners on audio. Thanks to the over the 11,500 that are watching the show live. We appreciate all your support for the show. Alongside me, for the first time in the co-host seat, and God, is he co-hosting with me well, the superb Billy T is in the house with me. Bill, thank you so much for making it so easy. We just need some signings, Bill, don't we now?
I like my transfer news, mate. No problem, yep.
We said at the start of the show, this is the graveyard shift. These are the shifts you've got to plug away for a golden nugget. Like Mike said, these are the times where everyone is waiting for a bit of news to drop. And it's not often you can have a top journalist like the wonderful Mike McGrath that's with us on this show that will be able to bring it to us live if it happens. And we promise you he will if it takes place. We're joined by a superb, like I say, Mike McGrath, football reporter for The Telegraph. One signing, Mike, that has got done this transfer window and has been sealed, delivered, and actually in the shirt. No doubt about that. He's been holding the shirt up. We are yet to see him play. That has been Sousa, who was Spurs' second signing of this window. I mean, there were suggestions that, given the reported interest in Andy Robertson, that the club may look potentially to loan him, given the fact if Robertson's move doesn't materialise in these final days of this transfer window, would you expect Sousa to be part of Spurs' first team squad and therefore get games in this second part of the season, Mike?
I kind of always thought that he was one for the future and that it could be a loan to Spain or somewhere to kind of get him experience. But look, it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge one, is it? I think it's like 12 million pounds. But there's been quite a few of those at other clubs as well. Villa have been in that market of 18, 19-year-olds. I think they bought a player called Alisson for about like that. And I think in general they are ones for the future to kind of work on for the next couple of years, rather than we've got a Champions League campaign to fight for and we need him in the first team. I think like you said, the Robertson pursuit kind of reflects his standing and where he'll be.
Thank you so much. I know Bill's got to come back in. Before he does, forgive me, I've done a bit of housekeeping, just very, very quickly, because Spurs are, we know now, secured in the next round of the Champions League. It does mean for our listeners on audio and for fans of Last Word on Spurs around the world, it does mean we're going to get at least one more away day locked in and in the bag. And what that means is, for the wonderful people out there, you've got to have NordVPN on your travels to make sure you can still enjoy all your favourite TV shows when you are travelling the world, in terms of who we're going to get still back home. So please make sure you check out NordVPN. They've currently got 4 extra months for free on a 2-year plan. There is no risk with Nord's 30-back money guarantee. All you've got to do is hit that link, nordvpn.com/LWOS. And for listeners on audio, you can just follow that link at the top of our audio description. As always, guys, like, hype, subscribe to the show. let me hand back to Billy T to kick us off on more players around London football clubs. Bill, let me hand back to you.
I know we mentioned January, and I don't dry January. Sorry, and I don't think this transfer particularly got the hairs standing on the necks of Tottenham fans. It was a bit of an intricate deal involving multiple players. And I think Tottenham fans are a bit puzzled by it still. There's strong rumours that Kinski is going to West Ham, which would leave Tottenham in a situation where they might need a backup goalkeeper. The problem with that one is apparently Jose Sarr might be heading into Nottingham Forest, so that might put a spanner in the works because Tottenham are linked with Sam Johnstone in a replacement for Kinski, but that's not sure because of said interest in Sarr. And then on top of that as well, there's been rumours that Tottenham might be swapping Kinski for the West Ham goalkeeper, Hermansen, who obviously is Danish as well and did play for Brøndby. Obviously, Thomas Frank has strong Brøndby links, as does our Danish director, Johan Langer. So lots and lots of moving parts there. I don't think any of them particularly excite Tottenham fans in the first place. But what do you make of this whole goalkeeper merry-go-round that we got there? With potentially 4 different goalkeepers all potentially moving there. Anything interesting in that?
I was working a little bit on the Kinski and Hermansen one,
yeah.
But just as of this afternoon said that it wasn't possible. The West Ham guy coming in, I'm not sure why, but that from looking quite positive that that one doesn't look like it's going to happen. So that does bring in others Sam Johnstone is available.
He was linked with Tottenham before, wasn't he? A while back.
Yes, yeah, they have him before. I think it would. I would say that would definitely kind of strengthen Vicario's place as well, because obviously he's had a very tough season. I think he's, if I'm right in saying as well, like the fans weren't too happy with him either at one point.
He's currently leading the Champions League in clean sheets, which just shows how crazy things are at the moment.
But I think it does kind of show the faith that they'd have in him, because the keepers that you're talking about would be for a number 2. I think even Sarr would be classed as number 2, if he went to Forest, because Sells is so strong there, and I think that really is the case with Vicario as well, who Frank has shown a lot of faith in, and has never kind of really wavered from, right, let's bring in what they call it now, 1.5 or whatever to push the number 1. That hasn't really happened.
Just on Vic, Mike, what has he been in there? 3 seasons or so? Over 3 seasons, you would hope you'd see genuine progression of a goalkeeper, get that feeling by the 3rd season. You'd hope that he really has not only just now that number 1 position, but has commanded the box, been very much kind of assured in goal. If anything, really, that Bill agrees with me, it feels like he's deteriorating in time here. I mean, Vicario, Mike, do you think potentially this is his final season at Spurs? They've been linked to Sunderland goalkeeper Robin Roos, who's had a really, really impressive season for them. I mean, any genuine interest there? And I suppose on that as well, what do you think the future holds for Vicario, if any, at Tottenham at the moment, given his very indifferent form?
Well, I think he's the man with the shirts at the moment, and I think if it is a strong second half of the season, you think that he'd continue with it. I think that the mistakes that he made were concentration, particularly with his feet, rather than technical errors, and that you have keepers can improve in time. Even like Lemens has done so well at Man U. I know that there's still work to be done on technical work on him to still get better and better, and it is a progress for him. I did think some of the saves he made were excellent last season, Vicario, and some of them maybe a little bit underrated as well. Kind of real saves that goalies would appreciate, and I think he's still a very, very good Premier League goalie, and I think those mistakes were probably just lapse of concentration. The Sunderland guy is excellent, but he'll
very good.
He'll probably go to a really big club eventually, from what I see.
That sounds like you're on us out there, Mike.
And I think it's fair to say that the Tottenham fan base are not the easiest to please, and I'm certainly include myself in that. I think the mood among the fan base at the moment is a bit, the transfer news that we've been linked with is met with quite a lot of negativity, say, particularly some of the older players that we mentioned. There's a couple of high-profile players like Kang In Lee and Marmouche. I'm sure the Tottenham fan base would love to see make the switch. But do you think a sort of high-profile move like that is unlikely? And do you think, as you have touched on before, Tottenham will be shopping in the loan market for these forward players rather than going out and signing a star signing like Marmouche or Kang In Lee?
Yeah, I think for Marmouche, it'd be very difficult for him to get from City. Savinho. Yeah, there's such a shame with the injury. He's out for quite a long time, Savinho, because obviously that looked like it might have had a chance, particularly with who they've signed over January. So yeah, I think a high profile one would probably be more the summer than in the next few days, and getting the right. To spend that money to get the right age as well is a really important thing for Spurs.
I know you've already touched upon Tell, Mike, so I'm going to probably ask you about Dragusin, and Bill's probably going to ask you about Basuma. Radu Dragusin's agent has not stopped talking despite the fact the guy's been out for the last 9 to 12 months nursing an ACL injury. I mean, it's bizarre when you think that we're paying his wages, but yet his agent is still talking. Is he the most noisiest agent you've ever heard, Mike, since coming to the Premier League? Radu Dragusin's agent? And do you think he wants a move? Can he get a move this late on, do you think now? A lot of talks around Italy again for him, Mike.
I think I remember when he came over, and I think I can't remember, but I kind of have recollections of him being quite, when journalists pick up the phone to him, he normally has a view on things. So, and look, that got him over to England as well from, I think it was Genoa before that, and he was, and he got his move over. So, look, I'm not going to be a journalist begrudging an agent talking, but also look, he's got to get playing again, hasn't he? And starting to kind of fulfill a bit of the promise that of why he was brought over. I wouldn't be too, nobody really buys people that have been out for a year, do they? Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be too worried about an imminent departure.
And we always joke about how you can never predict what Tottenham is going to happen. I think a player that no one thought had a future at Tottenham after various disciplinary issues. At the beginning of Frank, one of the first things that Frank did was publicly discipline him. He then had an off-field scandal, and suddenly he's now back starting Premier League games for Tottenham a few months later. And I don't think anyone would have predicted that. And actually, in the West Ham and the Burnley game was his first start for a while. I think his first start under Frank. He's actually been pretty good as well, Basuma. And suddenly, as the Premier League minutes come back, so did the transfer links, and he's been linked with Galatasaray. I kind of get the impression that, again, Thomas Frank will probably be reluctant to sell anyone at the moment with our injuries. But do you think Basuma might have bought him a bit more time at Tottenham? Because I know that there were strong rumours that he would be gone in January. But do you think he sort of saved his Tottenham career for the next until the summer transfer window at least?
Possibly. He was all right against Burnley. It's probably, I put him in the category of pretty much the other 11 players where they were all okay. Nobody had a stinker, but there was no match winner there. And he was all right. Yeah, he drove Spurs forward a little bit when he got on the ball. So I just, he looked like he was going to go. I really thought he was going to go to Galatasaray. I think the bid was accepted. Definitely was quite a big bid made, about 20-25 million for a player who didn't look to be in favour. But look, with the injuries that Spurs have got, the fact that they're going to have more matches to play in the Champions League, you think there might be a way back for him. I always thought that he was perfect for West Ham. Actually, I thought that would would be an obvious one, because they needed those type of legs in midfield, and they ended up, and I think West Ham thought that he was going to go to Turkey, and certainly the bids came in, but then he stayed. So there might be a little bit more bit left in the tank for him.
Okay, well, one man that we know the liquid in the tank is definitely running out for, and is pretty much heading to empty, is Fabio Paratici. We've had the confirmation, Mike, he is going to be leaving the football club. We had that confirmation mid-January transfer window that he's off. So in the space of 3 to 4 months of on the couch with Johan Lang, looking all pretty dapper, those interviews of how one is taking control of the youth strategic market, the other's going to be heading up the first team affairs and looking at players that are going to directly impact the first team. The duo is no longer more. So I just wonder, Mike, what have you made of this? I mean, me and Bill have not stopped talking about what we thought of it. So it's nice to ask you what you make of it as an outsider looking in. How in the space of 3 to 4 months has this new recruitment structure absolutely fallen to pieces, Mike?
Yeah, I think it is quite embarrassing, actually, because when they spoke together on screen, and they were kind of going through, well, my strengths, Paratici was saying that his strengths were basically player recruitment, and Langer was kind of the rest. So you have now a situation where player recruitment isn't, that strength is no longer going to be there. And I never thought that Vinay was that type of chief executive either. That type of football club executive that would be kind of moving in the market. I think he's so strong in other areas rather than the transfer market. So it just feels, particularly with Daniel, for whatever, obviously fans didn't like Daniel, but he was absolutely a full-on negotiator, and he got deals done for Spurs, and they were good for Spurs as well. I think in general, looking at them, his transfer work. Whereas I'm not quite sure. I think that obviously the jury's going to be out now on where Spurs go from here and the direction that they're going to go, and certainly kind of who's going to be leading them as well, because I think that's a huge. Paratici is just a huge presence, I think, in the market when he's around, when he came back, and obviously he was consulting as well before he came back officially. So that presence has been there, and now will be at Fiorentina.
Well, just on that very quickly, and Bill's going to come in and ask you as well, probably. I think he's got stuff to ask you as well about this situation, but I find it intriguing that Fiorentina are on their 3rd deal so far this window, and Paratici's not even gone there yet. So I just wonder, with your journalist hat on, who's doing those deals, Mike?
Yeah, I'm sure that it kind of can run itself. I'm sure, and I don't. I mean, he's still in the building, isn't he? He's not left, has he? He's not.
We know as much as you, Mike.
Yeah. So
who knows what this guy is doing?
They're signing Jack Harrison from a Premier League club. It'd be which is a bit out of the blue for Fiorentina, but yeah, it's a very strange situation. Maybe like kind of one way you can see they're just trying to kind of get through to the end of the season or get through to the next phase, but there'll be kind of that recruitment team might be strengthened in future.
And you did just mention him. Obviously, Vinay was brought in to work with Daniel Levy initially, and then there was a shock exit of Daniel Levy, and he has been sort of found himself in charge of the ship, if you will. And I think it's fair to say it's been a turbulent first few months at Tottenham for him. He's obviously lost a high-profile sporting director, or is about to lose anyway. He's lost a couple of other executives behind the scenes as well. Lost the first-team coach, and the manager, he very high-profile, backed, is under serious pressure as well. So not the dream start for Vinay, but do you think there's any chance that he might be under pressure? Because we know that he works underneath the executives and the Lewis family, and I'm sure it's fair to say that he, might have had a bit of a more difficult first 6 months than he anticipated. Do you think there's any chance that he might be under pressure?
Well, I think everybody's kind of under pressure to deliver, aren't they? Even the Premier League title holders are under pressure this season to deliver more results, and people are unhappy when they don't. I'm not quite sure whether I think there's obviously been a lot of faith in to bring him in and to bring in somebody from Arsenal with that background. You've got to rate them quite highly to in what they do if you're going to bring them to Spurs. But I don't, it's a very different club now. When you had Daniel running everything, to now it's a bit more unknown into how it's all going to run in the future.
We've heard a lot about lunches in the last few weeks, Mike. Frank's had a lot of lunches with a lot of people. Lunches with Nick Boycha, lunches with Johan Langer. I mean, he's had lunch with everyone pretty much.
I think normally if your boss is taking you out to lunch every day, you got to be alarm bells got to be ringing, haven't they?
I'd love to know, Mike, who reports into who here, from your understanding? Vinay, is he reporting to the Lewis family? From your understanding, I suppose the thing about it is that it felt with Daniel there's a lack of accountability for a long, long time, right, for a lot of Spurs fans in terms of how that was perceived. Daniel's now been moved on. So who is judging Vinay Venkatesham in his last 6, 7, 8 months in terms of what Billy said there? Losing a first-team coach, sporting directors walked out the door. The manager choice at the moment isn't looking fantastic. You've got one of the administrators in Rebecca Caplehorn that's moving out, another one moving in. I mean, who do you understand Mike's reporting into who here, if you know it?
Well, obviously the Lewis family have got kind of the control of the club, and they'll and they kind of will have a say in how it's run because it's their ownership, and then Vinay as the chief exec would be possibly the most powerful one of the executives at the club, and then the sporting directors below that. So. It's definitely not as clear cut as it was under Daniel, but yeah, that's kind of how I'd understand it to work.
And just a word quickly, Mike. I know we're going to be pushing the end time here. Johan Langer, it feels that maybe Frank and his future entwine because again, same nationality. Feels that maybe Johan was a big backer of Thomas Frank and still remains a big backer of him. Do you think Johan Lang has a long-term future at Tottenham, or do you think if there's a managerial change, it's likely maybe he follows potentially with him? What's your gauge on that, Mike, for you personally on Johan Lang's position at the club?
Well, I just thought that it was quite telling that interview that he said, where he said, what his strengths are, which is the kind of things away from the player recruitment, which Paratici kind of was looking after. So, I mean, he's obviously an excellent executive at those ones, but I'd be amazed after an interview like that saying that that's not his strength, that there wouldn't be somebody to kind of come in and kind of have a more kind of hands-on overseeing role of recruitment going forward. Considering he's kind of said it's not his main strengths and himself, from his own mouth. So it's a competitive market in that respect for the sporting directors, but also a very, very difficult job that people that are excellent at it, and even they don't last long at clubs and move on.
And obviously, as we've talked about this entire show, Tottenham fans and anyone around the club, I'm sure, is desperate for reinforcements at the moment. But it's kind of been dwarfed this January in terms of the story by Thomas Frank's future, and possibly, you could argue, an unnecessary distraction from being able to carry out the window in the way that they would like. But it seems like Tottenham is sort of going from game to game at the moment, and it seems like every single game, you're questioning whether Thomas Frank's going to be here at the end of it, which is not ideal. And I know that Thomas Frank himself has come out and says, well, he feels kind of safe in the job, and There's been various, reports that his job might be in danger. Fan sentiment, as you saw, took a real turn, particularly in the last couple of games against West Ham and Burnley. What's your sort of handle on the Thomas Frank situation? Do you think it is a case of literally going game to game at the moment? And do you think it's as volatile as it appears online? Or do you think he's going to be here till the summer regardless?
It certainly feels game to game. It feels that you have afternoons like Turf Moor, which were kind of quite brutal really for him. And you think, right, well, what is, can he survive it? But also just over that, in the aftermath of the West Ham defeat in particular, I just saw after that, I think that is there an appetite? The question is there an appetite to make what will be an expensive change at this point of the season where they are the fourth best team in Europe by the gauge of the Champions League table. They are crazy to say it because it's Tottenham and you don't associate this with them, but they are effectively safe from relegation. They aren't. They should, with 28 points on the board.
Mike, did you ever think you were ever going to say that on Last Word on Spurs about us being safe from relegation?
2 years in a row.
2 years in a row.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to say, but the fact is that they shouldn't. They've got enough points on the board where really, if you look at it logically, they won't get pulled down into that. So really the appetite to make that expensive change, is it there? And I think it has to get really bad for that to happen. But Billy, I can't disagree with you. It feels match to match. If it gets bad, if there's a really heavy defeat, if the fans, if the chanting, if it can possibly get any worse, if it does get worse, or sometimes, what do executives look at? They look at fans voting with their feet. Are they going to turn up to the matches? When they're either paying to go to the matches or using their season tickets. That's the kind of things that you're looking for game to game, and whether that's going to happen. Similarly, if Spurs beat Manchester City on Sunday, it's been an absolutely great week.
We usually do.
It's true. Yeah, particularly at the Etihad, and it's so things can change very quickly. But I can't disagree that over the last kind of month or so, it has felt pretty day to day, game to game.
And I promise you, Mark, we're coming on to the final couple of questions here. I'm laughing when I say this because I always joke and feel that there's never really a plan at Spurs. But has there been any real degree of future planning or short-term planning in regards to potential interims? Because it feels at the moment on the market, a lot of people that say, well, sack Thomas Frank right now, get him out right now. The big thing is, well, who are you getting him in? Who's coming in for him? Because there's no real club coach unless you take into account Johnny Heidegger that's literally just walked in the door, 10 to 12 days ago now. And obviously Michael Carrick's gone to Manchester United. There's been, some, I don't want to say fantasy ones from Tottenham fans, but suggestions of Harry Redknapp coming back maybe with Jermaine Defoe on the coaching staff and Glenn Hoddle walking back
Robbie
through the door.
Keane was at Forest today.
Robbie Keane, to be fair, Robbie spoke ever so well actually in his pre-match presser at Ferencvaros. He said his two boys are Tottenham fans and doesn't really let himself get carried away with the speculation. Mike, has there been any pre-planning, and do you think they will have somebody in place if necessary? If we, for example, were to go on a winless February run, do you think they would have someone in mind they've got to bring in, Mike?
I want to say I've not actually thought about that until you actually just mentioned it. But then look, you get, off the top of my head, you've got Ryan Mason who did that very, very well, and he held the fort when
and he's available. He's just been sacked by West Brom,
and he's available. So you'd have, there are good coaches, good some very good coaches around that could possibly do it. I mean, obviously Carrick would have been Carrick was available as well until very recently. It's a strange market where it's not a market really, is it? It normally does go to the assistant or whoever's on the coaching staff, and then strange things can happen. If it's Roberto Di Matteo or whoever it is, and they can go on and earn themselves a job.
And one of the things which seems to be keeping Thomas Frank in a job is, there's constantly spoken about how the caliber of managers available in the summer is completely different to the ones available now. I know obviously it's a bit of breaking news today, as that could be changing imminently with Roberto Diaby potentially being available. And obviously, I'm sure every Spurs fan and every executive would be delighted to swap him for Alonso right now. I'm not sure how realistic that is. And then you've got the name which comes up, and every time we have these discussions, and probably will forever, and Mauricio Pochettino, who is sort of perennially linked to Tottenham, both by fans and himself, it seems, in every interview that he does. Do you think, that Tottenham will reassess the situation in summer and maybe go for one of those coaches, and that's sort of part of the reason why Thomas Frank is still in the job?
I think that most clubs would have a kind of assessment at the end of the season as where they are. And that was the case at Spurs after winning a major trophy with Postecoglou. So I think that happens at most places, and there will be some. I think it was, there were a few kind of Pochettino chants, or a few kind of his name was kind of heard around Burnley. I'm not, I've not been to many home games, so I don't know whether that's the case at the home stadium. But look, it looks like it's going to be the end of the road for a lot of these World Cup managers. It'll be a good market for that. I think there's people available at the moment, like Xabi Alonso. But I also think something like Marco Silva. I wouldn't have thought it a few years ago. I think he'll probably get a big job one day because he's quite a modern coach like that. Will probably go to a big club for a couple of years. And there's quite a few that Spurs have spoken to in the past as well, who will come back up on the market.
Absolutely, Mike. To close us, and Spurs might have killed Billy off, but Billy might come back to say bye-bye. Look, you said it in the earlier part of the show. You feel in these final few days of the window, they're going to be looking potentially for a loan for that spot on the wing. Your gut feeling come the summer, you said they're going to reassess the situation around Thomas Frank, the overall performance of the season. How surprised would you be, Mike, based on what you've seen, the fan mood, results in the Premier League, although they've done very well in the Champions League so far? When you're back here in the summer, how confident or unconfident are you that when you're back here, Thomas Frank will still be leading Tottenham as the head coach, Mike?
Well, when you hear some of the stuff that's aimed at him, he looks like a guy who's really, really fighting for his job. So I don't think, I think that's just me assessing the situation of what I see. But don't rule out, I just wouldn't rule out a positive second half of the season if there is a run in Europe that excites people, and maybe some of the injured players coming back to, and I think that's at the heart of it is about exciting the fans as much as the results. And if there is a change, then I wouldn't want to kind of see somebody say, yeah, he'll definitely be gone. But certainly it's not been a great time for him recently, and it looks like he's kind of like scrapping to win the fans over, shall we say.
What do you reckon, Bill? I mean, I just asked Mike there to close the show if he feels Frank will be here at the start of next season.
I don't think he'll be here at the start of next month. To be honest, I think with our February fixtures, I think he's going to really struggle. I think what's going to cost him is the home fans are going to turn on him in that horrific one of fixtures, and I think it'll be difficult to stay after that, unless we can pick up some points from somewhere. So you never know. Yeah,
Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I know it's always tricky when it's Tottenham because you never quite know. We thought what we do, Mike. We thought we were going to bring you on later in the month when we were going to get a rush of signings, and it's this football club. You never quite know what's around the corner. Mike, very quickly, where can everybody find the wonderful work you do for the footballing community? Where can they find what you're going to do? Because I know you're going to be a very busy man in the next few days. If it isn't on Spurs, it will be around football and certainly in the Premier League. Mike, where are you going to be? Where can people find the wonderful work you do?
Yeah, so I cover all Premier League clubs as well as Spurs. So on X, I'm at McGrath Mike, and then at the Telegraph football website, that's where all our reporters file our stories to.
Mike, you've been a superstar. We can't thank you enough. Bill, thank you so much. We will be seeing you through to deadline day and beyond. And Bill, we are got to get something in line, but we've got to get something in these final days of this window. We've got to get something in these final days of the transfer window. Guys, thank you so much. Mike, thank you so much. Listen, let's hope Spurs are going to pull a rabbit or two out the bag between now and deadline day. From Bill, from Mike, from me. We've been the last one on Spurs. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks to the other 15,500 that have been with us as well. Please keep safe, keep well, and as always,